All right, this is a fascinating story about one of the largest consulting firms in the world now facing a criminal investigation.
More than 500,000 Americans have lost their lives in the opioid epidemic so far. But somewhere in the middle of this catastrophe, one of the world's most prestigious companies was getting paid millions of dollars to make it worse. McKinsey Company, the firm that advises presidents, CEOs, and governments, was working with Purdue Pharma, the maker of OxyContin. Their brilliant advice: turbocharge sales. They literally told Purdue to offer rebates to distributors for every overdose their drugs caused. For every person who died, the distributor would get money back. When the story broke, the world waited for consequences. McKinsey paid $573 million in settlements. Not a single partner was charged. Not one person went to jail. The firm didn't lose a single major client. Revenue kept climbing. Because that's the thing about McKinsey. Nothing ever sticks. Except now, something might just change all of that. But before we get there, let's understand how McKinsey became this untouchable beast. The firm was founded in 1926 by James O. McKinsey, a University of Chicago accounting professor with a deceptively simple idea. Corporations needed advice. Harvard and Wharton were producing more sharp graduates than anyone knew what to do with. So why not put those two things together? Hire the smartest people from the best schools. Rent their brains to companies willing to pay. Take a very large cut in the middle. By the 1950s, McKinsey had cracked the code on how to make this infinitely scalable. They were so successful that they were advising the President of the United States on how to run his office. Their secret? The so-called leverage model. At the bottom of the pyramid were junior analysts, bright 22-year-olds fresh out of university doing 80% of the actual work. Market research, data analysis, building the slides. Above them were engagement managers. They were responsible for delivering the project's outcomes and managing the client relationship. And at the top were the senior partners. They were the head honchos who would schmooze with the C-suite clients. The junior analyst got paid $80,000 a year. The partner billed them to the client at $500,000. The margin in between? That's the real business. Here's the genius of it. McKinsey never sold you a product. They sold you access. Access to a brand so powerful that being advised by McKinsey gave you cover. CEOs hired McKinsey not because the advice was always good, and we'll get to that, but because if the company later failed, at least you could say you hired McKinsey. "You can't get fired for hiring McKinsey" became a quiet refrain that echoes even today in the corner offices and halls of corporate America. The model is so successful that between McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, big consulting rakes in about $37 billion a year, all for giving you exclusive access to smart people in expensive suits. It is, in the most literal sense, the world's most expensive alibi service. They are inside every major government, every Fortune 500 boardroom, every major restructuring on Earth. Untouchable doesn't even begin to cover it. But it's not like they haven't had a few hiccups along the way. When you run such a powerful business, there are bound to be a few blemishes on your name. McKinsey's already survived more of those than most companies could handle in a lifetime. In 2001, McKinsey consultants helped Enron become a giant marketplace for commodity contracts. Jeffrey Skilling, Enron's CEO, the man who engineered the shift to mark-to-market accounting and caused their eventual downfall, was a McKinsey partner for 11 years before joining the company. But despite the massive $74 billion loss to investors, McKinsey escaped unscathed. It lost no clients. It kept on going. In 2018, McKinsey became caught up in the biggest corruption scandal in the post-apartheid history of South Africa. It was implicated in siphoning over $100 million from state-owned enterprises during the Jacob Zuma era. They paid back the fees, apologized, and kept on going. In the same year, journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. Western firms fell over each other trying to distance themselves from the regime. But McKinsey quietly continued its work with the Saudi government. And despite the bad press, it kept on going. Then there was Purdue Pharma. McKinsey paid $573 million in damages and still kept on going. How? Because the brand was worth more than any scandal. McKinsey had spent a century making itself synonymous with credibility, and clients decided that credibility was still worth the premium, even after everything. But all that was about to change because McKinsey became too clever for its own good. Here's what nobody is telling you about McKinsey's AI problem. The disruption hasn't come from outside. They did this to themselves. In 2023, McKinsey launched an internal AI tool called Lilli, trained on over 100,000 proprietary McKinsey documents, reports, frameworks, decades of engagement outputs, institutional knowledge that took a century to accumulate, compressed into a model that any consultant could query in seconds. By 2025, 72% of McKinsey's global staff was using Lilli every single day. The system was handling 500,000 prompts per month. It was saving 50,000 consulting hours per month. Think about what that means. 50,000 hours of work, the research, the synthesis, the framework building, the market sizing, that previously required teams of junior analysts grinding across weeks was now being done by a tool that costs a fraction of a single salary. Lilli didn't just speed things up. It made the junior analyst, the foundation on which McKinsey's business model rests, redundant. Their own AI chief put it bluntly. Do we need armies of business analysts creating PowerPoints? No. The technology can do that. Since Lilli launched, McKinsey's headcount has quietly dropped from 45,000 to 40,000. Other consulting firms have seen similar disruptions. BCG has frozen salary hikes for 3 consecutive years. Bain has quietly postponed entry-level hiring. The base of the consulting pyramid is cracking, but the layoffs aren't the problem. The senior partners would still be laughing their way to the bank if it were just about layoffs. The problem is what AI does to the fundamental value proposition of consulting. McKinsey charged you $500,000 because smart people were scarce. A Harvard-trained analyst who could synthesize an entire market in 2 weeks was a rare thing. Claude and ChatGPT cost $20 a month. Gemini is free. You can now run a competitor analysis, a market sizing, and a full strategic framework in the time it takes to drink your morning coffee. The scarcity that justified every McKinsey invoice for the last 100 years has evaporated, and when that scarcity disappeared, so did the leverage. Consulting is now standing at a fork in the road. At one end are software-led firms like the Palantirs of the world, companies that don't sell you analyst hours, they sell you proprietary platforms and data pipelines you can't get anywhere else. At the other end are deep domain experts in areas so complex and context-specific that no AI can replicate them. The giant middle, where the McKinseys and BCGs and Bains built their empires, that's what is dying now. Because generalism is exactly what AI does best, and it does so for a fraction of the cost. McKinsey survived opioids and Enron. It survived corruption on 3 continents. It survived because it had the smartest people in the world. And smart was scarce. But it isn't scarce anymore. They still have some very smart people, so they might just reinvent themselves. But this time it's different because it's not their reputation that is at stake. It's their entire business model. That's the kind of problem McKinsey used to charge billions to solve for their clients. Only time will tell if they can do it for themselves. What's your take? Will big consulting bounce back, or is this the beginning of their end? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.